What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and today we're going to be looking at yet another Pioneer deck. This one kind of bursting onto the scene due to some shifts in like the metagame. So we're going to be going over those things as we kind of dive into the deck and explain some of the choices that said person made with this specific deck list. But before we jump into all that stuff, I just want to say thank you for all the support that I've gotten. Really, over the last like month, my analytics on YouTube have been far above and beyond what I could have expected when I started uploading again after another super long hiatus. Magic has been something that's been super important in my life, a game that I've probably enjoyed the most out of any and all games. So the fact that I'm able to come back and like the community, even on like a small scale, just like encouraging me to essentially keep getting better and to keep going over deck lists, coming up with new video ideas and stuff like that. That's awesome, and I really appreciate it. So with that be out of the way, I do have a Discord channel that I will link in the description of all my videos, and hopefully the links still work. If it doesn't and you try to join it, just comment and I can post a link in the comments and stuff like that. And of course, continue to subscribe to the channel. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for watching. And without further ado, let's look into the Boros Aggro deck for Pioneer. So here we are with the Boros Aggro deck in Pioneer. Got second in the challenge by Alienware. Um, Essentially what the Boros aggro deck is trying to do, it is playing a ton of these super cheap creatures like favorite Hoplite, who has the heroic ability, which we'll get to here in a second. Cards like Monastery Swiftspear with prowess ability, Illuminator Virtuoso, who cares about being targeted by spells and abilities, kind of like favorite Hoplite, 10th District Legionnaire, same thing. All these cards benefit from being targeted by spells. Some of those spells being cards like Ancestral Anger, where a creature gets trample and plus X plus O, where X is the number is 1 plus the number of cards named Ancestral Anger in your graveyard. Draw a card. Defiant Strike, drawing a card gives a creature plus 1 plus O. God's Willing, giving your creature protection from a color, so on, so on. So a lot of these are either pumping your own creatures or you're getting some benefit from targeting like the creature, like they all cantrip, or at least like in terms of Ancestral Anger and Defiant Strike, 1 mana cards that draw cards. God's Willing can scry 1, so on and so forth. So getting into that, the cards that care about it are essentially the ones that gain bonuses from being targeted. So favorite Hoplite is I don't know if it's a standard all-star, but it is definitely becoming a pioneer all-star. So whenever it's a target of a spell, whenever you cast a spell that targets favorite Hoplite, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and you prevent all damage that would be dealt to it this turn. So it can be used like defensively and offensively. You can attack with it, pump it with a Defiant Strike. It ends up being a 3/3 after you add the +1/+1 counter and then the +1 plus O. And then you prevent the damage, and a lot of times you're just going to win combat at that point. Obviously, any 3 toughness thing blocking favorite Hoplite is going to die, and of course you can put more pump spells into it, especially if it's more Defiant Strikes or Ancestral Angers, just to keep drawing cards. This deck can win one of 2 ways. It can either really like go all in on like a favorite Hoplite, even like a Swiftspear or like a 10th District Legionnaire, or it can go wide with all of these things and just use its pump spells to like pump an unblocked creature. 10th District Legionnaire doing the same thing. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and then you scry 1. Illuminator Virtuoso, whenever it comes to target of a spell you control, you connive, which isn't guaranteed to give you a +1/+1 counter, but like with cards like Homestead Courage that have flashback, you can essentially discard these cards for free, put a counter on the Virtuoso, and then obviously flashback the Homestead Courage to kind of start the loop all over again. And then this having double strike as well can end games, especially when you have cards like Ancestral Anger that give cards trample. Obviously, if you can get this up to like a 6-7 power trampler, like it's going to more than likely win combat. Or if you can combine cards like God's Willing, or just get rid of your opponent's board, Virtuoso could just single-handedly win you the game. And that's basically the game plan for this deck. Super simple, super easy, and it's taking over the Pioneer metagame because of the choices, honestly, from some of the top decks that we've already covered on this channel. So if you look at decks like Blue-White Control and the Rakdos mid-range deck, they have very good matchups against this, or at least on paper they're good matchups, because you have cards like Supreme Verdict that don't care about favorite Hoplite being able to negate damage. I believe that there is some other cards in here, like God's Willing negates that effect, or God's willing doesn't negate the effect of being destroyed by like Supreme Verdict and things like that. And I'm moving my mouse all over the place because I'm not very coordinated. And then like the Rakdos aggro deck is just full of just removal spells and then creatures that honestly just make it hard for like these guys to attack through, even with having um, BS answers and stuff. So like favorite Hoplite notably, I believe its trigger will prevent the damage after Bone Crusher's Stomp. So that's where you can kind of get in trouble with like the black red mid range deck. Um, and really, that's where this deck does not want to be playing those matchups. It wants to be playing against mono green. It wants to be playing against mono blue, and it wants to be playing against like mono red. All decks that are trying to like enact their own game plan, they sort of kind of ignore what you do, and then you can just like play a bunch of these guys, go wide, and then like pumped an unblocked one, get in for tons of damage, and then your opponent still has to respect the fact that they could die to any one of your creatures just from like a single pump spell. Um, there's some interesting interactions with this deck. Like this here, Invigorated Rampage just looks like another way to give like a big buff plus give something trample. Essentially, this could be like +5/+1 to some of your other things and trample, or it can technically add 6 power by giving 2 creatures 2/0 and trample until end of turn. Essentially just getting more triggers with either Virtuoso, Favorite Hoplite, 10th District Legionnaire, some combination of those things. Even can pump like a Dreadhorde Arcanist, so you can eventually just flash back another one of these spells. Um, be it like a Reckless Rage as like a removal spell, get an additional target. Reckless Rage does have some synergy with Favorite Hoplite because you can target Favorite Hoplite with it. It'll become a 2/3, so it won't die to like the damage necessarily. But you will just be preventing damage that is dealt to it, so that when the Reckless Rage deals the 2 damage to a creature you control, it's not actually going to get to deal the damage to the creature, and you'll get to deal the 4 damage to their creature. It's essentially just like a Flame Slash would be like the best way to like uh, put it with upside, because obviously you get the counter or something from Favorite Hoplite, or even like targeting with 10th District Legionnaire, it's gonna pump past the 2 damage and it won't die, and then you obviously get some scries too. Um, Sideboard stuff like Fight is one. Another thing that targets and it's more protection. This would be more for like the like board wipes that you'd traditionally see from like the like black based mid-range decks like red black mid-range or even like white black mid-range. And even like blue white control. This does a very good job of protecting at least one or two of your creatures. You can't choose both, so like you could just technically have a Dreadhorde Arcanist live. The rest of these are human, so it's like kind of like negligible that you'll ever get to, save two things with this. But there is always the possibility. Portable Hole, good for getting like just problematic like permanents and stuff out of the way. Rending Volley, sometimes you just need to kill things. Turns out you don't need this to kill 3-mana Teferi, because 3-mana Teferi is not legal. I had someone point that out to me in the last Pioneer video I posted, so thank you for that. Adato Vanguard, classic. I mean, just it's an indestructible thing. Like, there's not a lot of like -X like removal like in the format. So Adato Vanguard usually for 4 life gets to eat like a few removal spells before it actually dies. Showdown of the Scalds, a perfect like top end way to like kind of go big against some of the other like big aggro decks. Simply for the fact that like you just get to draw 4 cards with this and then play them until your next turn. And when you already have a board full of creatures, as you're going up the curve, you're casting spells that target them. They get counters. This gives them counters, so on and so on. So that's Boros Aggro, Pioneer format. The deck's great, I think, as long as the metagame shifts towards like decks that are trying to beat mono green, mono blue, mono red. Boros Aggro will always have a home. Um, but as like Rakdos and like Blue White are popular, the deck does get worse. So if you go to a store and a lot of people are playing just Blue White control, Black Red mid range, or even like just black base like mid range decks, um, this deck is not going to be very good. It's going to be entering a um, very hostile environment, very hostile meta. So definitely if you would, you probably want to tweak this deck more to like have maybe a few more God's willing type effects or like security shelters and things like that, just to prevent from getting completely like blown out by like infinite fatal pushes and um, with the other cards and stuff like that. Like opposing Reckless Rage just kind of suck, but you know that's the name of the game. That's the Boros Aggro deck. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. You guys killed it on the second to last Pioneer video, the Lotus Field deck. That was super awesome. I think it's like one of my few like double-digit like videos. So like that's super awesome. It's got me pumped. So I appreciate everyone showing like the support. If you haven't already and you're considering it, you should definitely subscribe because I'm going to be doing a lot of Pioneer content, a lot of modern content. You know, I love playing those formats, and I'm just going to keep bringing it to everybody until I don't know. I have to stop again, which hopefully is never, and I get to keep doing it uh, even more often than what I've been doing it. So, really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video.